This is the Book Deal Podcast,
where you will discover the inspiring stories of the authors behind your favourite books.
No matter what stage of writing you are at, we've got you covered. I'm Tina Strong.
And I'm Madeleine Cleary, and join us as we pull back the curtain of published authors.
One deal at a time.
The Book Deal Podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters which it's recorded on, and pays respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I had the joy of chatting with Irma Gold, award-winning writer, editor and podcaster, just after the release of her brilliant second novel, Shift, out now with Midnight Sun. Books and Publishing recently said about Irma that she has cemented herself as a standout voice in Australian contemporary fiction. Irma's writing accolades are numerous, so I will do my best to summarise them. Irma's debut novel, The Breaking, won the New South Wales Writers' Centre Varuna Fellowship, a Canberra Critics Circle Award, and was shortlisted for the ACT Notable Award for Fiction. Irma's short fiction was published in a collection called Two Steps Forward and also has been widely published in journals and anthologies. Irma is also the author of 5 picture books for children, most recently Where the Heart Is. Irma has so much advice to give from all angles of the industry as an editor for over 2 decades and the co-host of one of my favourite podcasts, Secrets from the Green Room. I hope you enjoy. Irma Gold, welcome to the Book Deal Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's so exciting to do a podcast crossover as well.
It is. It's so exciting. I'm so thrilled to be here with a fellow podcaster.
Yes, and I see we're actually wearing matching green colours as well.
I know. What are the odds? We're just already in sync.
That's right. So I'm so excited. We're here to talk about your latest novel, Shift, which we were just talking about before we hit record, is such a beautiful novel. I went straight through it, but I really want to read it again so I can go sentence by sentence because it's so beautifully crafted. So congratulations on...
Thank you so much.
Before we do, though, I actually wanted to reflect. I don't think you know this little anecdote. So last year you were at the Soweto Writers Festival. I was visiting as not as a writer or a speaker, but as an attendee. And I actually saw you from across the room. We hadn't met yet. I saw you from across the room in the Conti, and you were having lunch, I think, with some writers. And I recognized you because I'm a big fan of your podcast. And I was like, go, Madeleine, go introduce yourself to Irma. Say hello, tell her how much you love the podcast. But I didn't. I was too afraid.
Oh, it's like such a familiar story. I remember being like that, and sometimes I still am, not so much anymore. But especially before you've been published, I think you feel like, oh, why would that person want to talk to me? I have to say, I feel like it's a very odd thing when people say that to me, and they tell me these stories about how they were too scared to come and talk to me. And I think it's just, I'm like, but why? I'm just me. But I remember feeling that way myself. And so, I mean, I've said on our podcast quite a lot, really encouraging people to come up and say hello, because actually it's so great. Like, it's the best. And we're all just writers together. You know, we all are interested in the same things. We all want to chat about the same things. And I think there's very few writers who would sort of snub somebody. I mean, there are writers like that and there are stories like that, but I'm not one of them. So everyone should come and say hello.
That's right. All right. If you see Irma out and about, go say hello to her.
Absolutely. Please do.
Do you think it's a bit of imposter syndrome before you're published, where you feel like you're not part of that community? And is that something that you've now got 2 novels out in the world and you've got a whole series of other books as well? Does this imposter syndrome ever go away?
I don't think it does, but I think certain things change, like that. What you're talking about there, that does really change, I think, because it's like any social gathering, right? If you know a few people, it's not nearly so daunting and you've already kind of got a crew. So, but, I've been to writers' festivals, sometimes where I don't know anyone, and then that is then daunting until you see someone who you know. So I do think it shifts. There's definitely that period where you sort of feel like you're trying to break into that community. And unless you already know people in it, that can just feel really hard until you're actually published. But I think imposter syndrome just continues on. I mean, we were talking just before we started recording about how, you know, you have this worry before your book comes out, will everyone hate it, you know? And everyone feels that still. It doesn't matter how many books you've published, you have this absolute dread that, oh my God, what if nobody likes it? And so for me, like, you know, with Shift, when I got the first books and publishing review, which was said the most amazing things, like more than I could have possibly hoped for, like just such amazing things about the book and about me as a writer. And the predominant emotion that I felt was relief. And I just think that's always the way. So I don't think that self-doubt ever really goes away. And, you know, on Secrets from the Green Room, I've spoken to so many people now, you know, people like Charlotte Wood and Christos Tsiolkas and, you know, all these people who've had huge success, and they all still have some element of that imposter syndrome, self-doubt. It's just, I think it's just part of being an artist, actually. And, you know, in Shift, Ali, the main character, is a photographer. I'm sure we'll get onto this, but you know, he has this too. And that's one of the things that I think is really common across the arts, because it's such a vulnerable thing to put your work out into the world and have it judged, essentially. So it's really vulnerable. I think there's always going to be self-doubt there.
Well, that is very reassuring, because I did just say earlier that I was awake at 3 a.m. wondering if everyone, well, 1, if anyone's going to read my book, 2, if everyone is going to hate it, or 3, which I think is even worse, if there'll be like a neutral response to it. Oh, no, it was pretty good. 3.5 star.
I'm sure that won't happen. I mean, you've got such a fascinating premise for the book. I'm very excited to read it. So I'm sure that's not the case.
All right. Now, I want to talk. So let's go back to the beginning, because I'm really curious to know, what was the first thing that you ever published, Irma?
I think it was a short story, and I had a really unusual set of circumstances that probably set me up badly for thinking this is what writing and publishing was like, because it was a competition and I won first prize. And then, you know, the local newspaper came and took my photo and took the worst photo you could ever. I mean, I don't know why. They took it from the ground looking up, and I was young and they gave me a double chin. I mean, come on. But yeah, and there was prize money and, you know, it was all the things.
Was that for like a short story?
Yeah, it was a short, and it was a really short story. Like, I can't remember how many words, but I know it was only 1 page.
Wow. And that you got a photo, your picture taken.
Yes, it was part of Reconciliation Week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was just like this lovely, lovely thing. And I think I even got some like medallion type thing or something. I can't remember now. It's so long ago.
Was that the first thing you'd ever written, or have you always wanted to be a writer?
So my mum taught me to read before I started school, and I just always wrote. I was always making books, but I didn't actually know you could be a writer. I know that sounds kind of dumb, but I never imagined it. You know, writers were these kind of hallowed beings. I never conceived of being a writer, even though I was making my own books from, I mean, as early as I can remember. And I think there are like a few things that happened along the way that all kind of fed into each other. I still really distinctly remember when I was 16 and I just moved schools, and I'd made friends with this girl called Simone, who is still one of my dearest friends. And shortly after I started at the school, her mum died. And I remember sitting there talking to her about it, and I'd never had anybody close to me die. And she was talking about how angry she was and how, you know, people were just saying these platitudes, the adults around her. And I remember just feeling really kind of useless about how I could actually support her and help her. And we were both big readers, and we were, you know, doing lots of writing. And so I went away and I wrote this short story from the perspective of a girl our age, but who has her grandmother die. And I put all of the kind of feelings that I was observing in my friend into this young girl's character. And when I gave it to her, she said so vehemently, "That is exactly how I feel. And no one understands. That is exactly how I feel." And I mean, it was such a great thing for me to be able to do for her. But I remember it was the first moment where I went, oh, I have actually been able to put myself into the shoes of someone else's lived experience. And it's not something I've experienced, but I've been able to make that feel true on the page. And that was, I look back on that now and I think that was really pivotal. I still didn't know I could be a writer at that point, but that was like really pivotal in me going, oh, this is actually something I can do. But to go full circle, just so it's not as great as it sounds, because then years later, so I went after school, I didn't know what to do. I mean, it seems so obvious now that I would be a writer and an editor, but I had no idea. And so I went off to the UK and I was working terrible jobs and traveling and partying, and I stopped writing for the first time in my whole life. And it was that moment of stopping writing when I realized, oh, this is actually something I have to do. And that was when I decided, I don't know if I'd quite decided I was going to be a writer. I think I probably had, but I decided I was going to come back to Australia and study creative writing. And in my first shoot of creative writing, we had to write a piece. And I was just so like, oh my God, what can I write? It's got to be good. I kept writing stuff and I couldn't come up with anything I was happy with. And in the end, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use that story that I wrote when I was 16. Now, at the time, that story got an A+. It was selected to go in the school. You know, we had a magazine and at the end of the year featured the best works. It went in there. So, you know, it was generally regarded as an exceptional piece of writing. Well, I gave that into my first shoot. I had the brilliant Susan Hampton. This was in Canberra, and she tore it to shreds. And it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I was like, right, if I actually want to be a writer, I'm going to have to step my game up. That story was a 16-year-old story. It's not good enough. So it was an amazing thing. It was really, honestly, the best thing that could have happened to me.
Don't rest on your laurels as a writer.
No.
Don't draw from your 16 yourself. I mean, draw from that nostalgia, those themes, perhaps, but you can keep persisting. So, what do you think? So you're studying creative writing. You sort of have this now. You've conceived an idea of being a writer, and being a writer is something. Where do you go from there? So you're writing a short fiction, and you've published in a newspaper. You've won this competition. What next?
Well, the first thing was when I decide to do something, I throw my whole self in. And so I was like, I am only going to be a writer. And if that means I'm going to live in a garret and earn no money, so be it. And I had, in my second year, my tutor was Craig Cormick, who I did the first 2 seasons of the Secret from the Green Room podcast with. We are great friends. We've been friends since then. But he said, oh, you know, you guys are going to need to support yourself with something other than writing. And I was just like, oh, no, I'm not. I'm just gonna be a broke writer. That's what I'm going to do. and then after a little bit, I was like, you know what? I think I might actually have to live. So
after eating probably 2-minute noodles every night for the last 2 months.
Exactly. So then I volunteered on an arts magazine in Canberra, which was called Muse Magazine. It's now defunct, but it was a magazine that had a long history. And I started volunteering there, and I thought, this is the only job I want. So this is how I realized I wanted to be an editor as well. It was the two kind of came in tandem for me. And so I thought when I finished uni, I thought that's the only job I want to do. And I thought the person doing that is never going to go somewhere else. So what am I going to do? And then a month later, I get a call saying that she was moving to another position and would I take the deputy editor's job? And then a year after that, the editor left and I interviewed for the job and I got the editor's job. So my writing and my editing kind of happened in tandem. And at that time, I was starting to publish short stories and it kind of went on from there.
So your debut collection of short stories, Two Steps Forward, so that was published in 2011. Was that the first sort of stories collection that you'd published?
Yes, it was. So I'd had a couple of kids' books out before then, which kind of happened accidentally.
How does publishing picture books happen accidentally, Emma?
Well, I was working as an editor for the National Library of Australia, and they decided to set up what is now a hugely successful children's publishing program. And Susan Hall, who was then the publishing director, said to me, would you like to write a couple of children's books based on the collections? And so I did.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah, and they were great fun to do. So they were the first books I had published, but yeah, they were kind of accidental. And for a while, some people thought that I was a children's author first, which I never was. I was always writing adult fiction from the start. And then with my short stories, I submitted so that was published with a firm press as part of a series of 5 short fiction collections called Long Story Shorts. And they did a call out for submissions. They got 450 submissions, and I was shortlisted but ultimately rejected. And when I got the rejection letter from Martin Hughes, he said to me, "Would you like feedback?" And I was like, yeah, sure. Now, this is a lesson to everyone. Take up the opportunity to get feedback, because apparently a lot of people never responded to that email.
What? Really? Isn't that gold though?
It's mind-blowing to me. You know, if your work is rejected, and it had been shortlisted, so it had got close, that feedback may not tell you anything, but it also might. And definitely, if someone's offering feedback, always take it. So anyway, I said, yes, please. And he went back to the 2 readers' reports, and they said really opposing things. And so he thought, well, to give Irma feedback, I'm actually going to go away and read this manuscript.
Wow.
So I know, which is amazing for a publisher to do that. So over his Christmas holiday, no less, he went away and read that manuscript, which became 2 Steps Forward. And then he phoned me to offer me a contract.
Oh my gosh, I just got shivers.
So it was such an amazing thing to be shortlisted, rejected, and then get a contract. So always say yes to feedback.
What was it like when you got that phone call? Pretty unexpected as well.
Yeah, it was totally unexpected. It still, I think, is one of the best phone calls I've ever received.
Aww.
It was just, it was so exciting. And that was my first adult fiction book. So yeah, it was amazing. And that was a beautiful series. They did such a great job with that series.
So before we dive into talking about Shift, I just want to ask about Sarah Ferguson and the Duchess of York. Can you tell me what she has had in your involvement in your career?
Well, I don't know how this happened, but my book, Where the Heart Is, which is a children's book, was read by her on this. I think it might have been during COVID that it started, where she has this channel. I don't know if she has it anymore. I don't think she does, but she had an enormous following, and she would read these children's books, and she, had a whole little set like organized for her, and the set for Where the Heart Is, which is a story, and it's based on a true story about a penguin who every year leaves the man who rescued him from an oil spin to return 6,000 kilometres away, and then he comes all the way back again every year. It's sort of scientifically unheard of. And anyway, so I wrote this story, but the set was hilarious. It was like all this fruit. It was very phallic looking. It was really quite bizarre. And then when she gets on to read, like, she's obviously not read the book before, and it is hilarious. It is the worst reading of that book that has ever been done, but it was so great. Like, and also because, I was talking before about being that kid on my bedroom floor writing my stories. Well, I grew up in England, and I was obsessed with the royal family, and I wrote a book about the marriage of Sarah Ferguson and the prince who shall not be named. So to have her reading my book was extraordinarily, like, it was just like my younger self would have been in a meltdown, like absolute meltdown. So it's just the best thing, because it was just hilarious and terrible and wonderful and like just extraordinary. Like, it's still so bizarre.
Is it on YouTube still?
It is still on YouTube. People can Google it. It's worth watching just for the humor. I would say it's not really reflective of the writing. Read it yourself, because you'll read it better than Sarah Ferguson.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Okay, well, let's talk now about so you've moved from short fiction, picture storybooks to novel writing. And you said that you've always been writing for adults. Was a novel always in mind for you?
I originally thought that I couldn't write a novel. Like, it just seemed an insurmountable thing. How did you even do it? I mean, I remember being at uni studying creative writing thinking, I don't know that I could ever do that. But I remember also having the same thought as an editor, like how would I ever edit a novel? And now I'm editing novels constantly. So I suppose over time, I began to see that it might be something I could do. I do have a novel zero, which will never see the light of day, that I worked on for 7 years and just could not get it to work. There were just elements of it I couldn't. There are elements in that book that are fantastic, and there are other elements that are just so bad, and it didn't hang together. But it was, it was a training novel. And then I think with my next book, The Breaking, I actually tricked myself into writing that novel because I thought that I was writing a short story, which ended up being the first chapter. And when I took it to my writing group, they were like, well, we want to know what happens next. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll write some, I can't think of the word now, join short stories. What's the word? You know what I mean anyway.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm sorry, but this is menopause. The simplest words go out of your brain. Do not look forward to it.
Also being on publicity.
No, just menopause. Anyway, so I went away and I wrote another linked. That's the word I was looking for. See, not a hard word. I went away and I wrote another short story. And I brought that to my writing group, and they again said, we want to know what happens next. And the wonderful John Clancy, who is my self-appointed mentor, said to me, I think you might be writing a novel. And so by that point, I think I had about 20,000 words. So I'd kind of tricked myself into starting to write a novel, and then it just happened really easily from there, actually. The Breaking, I don't know if I'll ever have a writing experience like that. It just kind of flowed out of me.
What a great way as well to sort of get people invested in you. Like they want to see the next part of the story. They want to see the next chapter. I love that way of doing that. And having that writing community around you can often be so important to keep. It's like, when you sign up to go to a gym class and you go with a friend, your friend's going to wait on you. If you don't turn up, then your friend's going to be on their own. So it's almost like doing things together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that if I hadn't have taken that work to that writing group, I would have just thought, oh yeah, I've written a short story. Great.
Exactly. Community, very, very important.
Very important.
Let's talk about your second novel now. So Shift, which came out on the 10th of March. So that's about a month from recording. And the setting is just an incredible place. Soweto in Johannesburg in South Africa, a place that I knew absolutely nothing about. And ashamedly, I think it's an incredible setting for a novel. So can you, Irma Gold, give us your elevator pitch for Shift?
Oh my God. I am so bad at doing an elevator pitch for this novel.
Okay, well, don't just tell me what's it about?
I should be good at that. But every time I see someone describe the book in a review, I think, wow, you've nailed that in a way that I have not.
Often the hardest thing, isn't it, as an author?
I feel like I actually find it really, really hard. And I think it's partly because there are so many things going on in this book, and you've got the complexity of all of that in your head, don't you? And so it's just, I find distilling it into one sentence, I feel like I got it with The Breaking, but with this book, I still don't have a good elevator pitch. But anyway.
And does it change? Have you found it's changed as well? Like your pitch?
I'm just not doing very well at it, Madeleine.
Okay. I'm sure it'll be good. I actually, I understand because I had to pitch The Butterfly Women for the first time last week for my own, like I was being interviewed for a podcast, and I was like doing it like 5 minutes before the interview, like just still tweaking things. I'm like, it's hard to distill. And I think often it's getting a third person to do it for you.
Yeah. It really is. I wish I could remember what the reviewers had said, and then I could just quote that back. I should be more onto this. The book is about Ali, who is an Australian photographer. He's in his 30s and he's just kind of failing at life, really. He's moderately successful. He's good at what he does, but, like many people in the arts, he's at that kind of mid-career stage where he's not kind of making it, and he's not got much money, and he's also had a series of failed relationships. And when he has another breakup, he decides that he needs to do something different, and he goes to South Africa, where his mother was born and grew up, because there's mystery surrounding her growing up there, and he's intrigued by the place and by her silence around the place. And when he gets there, he ends up in Kliptown, which is a place where I've spent a lot of time and meets all these wonderful people, and things kind of unfold from there. This is the bit I find hard talking about without spoilers.
Yes, well, leave that. I think that's a great cliffhanger to end it on. And yeah, it's such an interesting, fascinating book. And that pitch was wonderful, Irma.
Oh, thank you.
You did a great job. So don't beat yourself up. That was great. So much probably better than I can do.
Hi, my name is Emily Paul, and I am the author of the historical novel The Distance Between Dreams, which is out now from Fremantle Press. The novel is the story of Winston Keller, a young man from the working class who can't afford the luxury of a dream, and Sarah Willis, the daughter of an ambitious businessman who dreams of freeing herself from his expectations. The two meet at a party one night in 1939 and fall for each other. Hard. But a long-held secret that links their two families and the growing world conflict of the Second World War pulls the two lovers apart. Will they be able to find their way back to one another? And if not, will they ever be able to move on? This book has a little something for everyone, including music, dancing, Shakespeare, Australian rules football, Hollywood movies, punch-ups, and a dashingly handsome American submariner, and brings to life the West Australian port town of Fremantle, which was the second largest active port during World War II after Pearl Harbor. It's out now, just in time for Mother's Day, or just for anyone who loves being transported back in time when they read.
Tell us about your own family connection to South Africa.
Yeah, so my dad was born in Johannesburg in the year that apartheid officially began, and he's not South African. So his dad is French and his mum was English. And but he grew up there, and then they left when he was about 15 or so. So I was always fascinated with South Africa. And when I was about 14, I read a book called Biko, which is by the journalist Donald Woods, who uncovered basically how Steve Biko, who was one of the freedom fighters, was murdered under the apartheid regime. And that book just totally fired me up. I already had this fascination with South Africa, and from that point, I just went and read everything I could get my hands on about the freedom fighters. And, then I went into fiction, Doris Lessing, Andre Brink, and I was just reading everything I could. And Soweto was the heart of that resistance movement, and I just always wanted to go there. And it's not really the place most people would have on their bucket list.
It's not a typical holiday.
It's not a holiday destination. But I had wanted to go there my whole life. And in fact, two of my brothers made it there 10 years before I got there. And both of them separately came on, trips with me to Soweto. And it just, I'd been so obsessed with the place my whole life. And then to get there, I just became more obsessed with it. And on this one time that I was there in Soweto, my brother is an architect, so I drew on him for the character of Harris, Ali's dad. And I chose to have him as an architect because actually, when I was there with my brother Albert, you realise what a fascinating perspective that is on a place like Kliptown, which is, it's mostly tin shacks. There are some brick buildings that were built during apartheid, but they're tiny and they're very basic. But on that last day in Soweto, we didn't really know what to do, and we went to Kliptown to look at this memorial to the Freedom Charter, where the Freedom Charter was signed. It's actually the 70th anniversary of the Charter this year, which is kind of amazing timing for my book. And we met this guy called Bongani who said to us, would you like me to show you around Kliptown? And we just ended up spending the whole day with him and his cousin Jacob. And it was just amazing. And I was like, oh my God, I want to come back here. So the next time I went back with my other brother, Roland, and we worked with Sky, which is the Soweto Kliptown Youth, an organisation that basically looks after kids after school and gives them a place to come that's safe and, plays games with them, because their parents might be in Joburg at work. So they're actually unsupervised. Sometimes the kids as young as 3 are unsupervised. And so it gives them a place to come. It gives them someone who can help them with their homework, and sometimes there's food, which is important. So yeah, I just was unbelievably welcomed into this community. Like, it makes me quite emotional talking about it. And Bob Namang, who's the founder of Sky, just, he said to me when I was there, Irma, you have to write about Soweto. And I was already thinking about it. So I was like, okay, Bob's given me the green light. But, his support, just like, we were talking before about the reviews, and the reviews are amazing. And, like when you get, I've just got a couple of 5-star reviews, and like it's just unbelievably amazing. But to me, Bob's support means more than anything. And also Nick Malongo, who's, an international author, but a Sowetan author who's published like 10 books. And, I asked him to come on my podcast, which he agreed to, which blew me away. And then I asked him if he might consider reading my manuscript, which he did. And I know like endorsements in the industry are often just like, oh yeah, they're friends with that person. But Nick had no reason to endorse my book at all. And so for him to do that means more than anything, with the fact that he's written these 10 novels set in Soweto. So I've forgotten your question, and I've gone off on a total tangent.
No. Oh, I was just absorbed in your answer then. I think it's amazing. And did you experience, I guess, some trepidation about writing a novel set in Soweto, given where, you're writing about a culture that's very different to your own in a country that's not your own? How do you approach that, making sure you get that story right?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I thought about constantly during the writing of this book, and, what the ethical implications were from my creative choices. Sometimes I actually found thinking about it almost paralyzing. There were points during the writing of the book where it actually stopped me from writing, because I'm a huge supporter of own voices writing, stories by marginalised peoples from their own experience. And I work as an editor with a lot of First Nations authors and illustrators. I've kind of become a bit of a go-to editor for First Nations work, and I love doing that. And it's really important to me to be a part of getting that diversity of work out to Australian readers. So, but I also do think that it's possible to imaginatively understand people with different lived experiences to your own. But obviously, it has to be done really respectfully, really carefully. And, I very deliberately tell shift through the eyes of Ali, who is an Australian and who is an outsider. So he's also able to reflect on, his own ethical dilemmas that he's facing, because he's creating this exhibition of work to really show what. So he's a photographer of people, and he gets people to sort of see inside people. So he's putting together this exhibition, and in doing that, he's also reflecting on, his own privilege and his own role as, an outsider in a community that he will never fully be, a part of. In a sense, he will always be slightly a part. So I thought about that a lot. I also asked my dear friend Amakalani to read the manuscript and just make sure that I hadn't got anything wrong culturally, and was really heartened that there were only a couple of very tiny things that she picked up. And also she was able to pick up where I got the Kasi language wrong. So Kasi is like the Sowetan slang. So that was so helpful to me that she picked up all of, the things that I hadn't got quite right, and sometimes gave me a different suggestion. But I will say for your listeners, if they're using sensitivity readers, this is something that I think is so important. Even though Amakalani was my friend, I made sure that I paid her appropriately for her work. And I would say, do not ask a sensitivity reader to read your manuscript unless you can pay them appropriately. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, and completely fair, I think, absolutely. Talking about Ali then, and he feels this sense of belonging to the community almost, even though he is an outsider. He feels almost more at home in Cliptown than he does back in Melbourne. Talk a little bit about Expat and that discomfort that sometimes though you feel, even though you do feel that sense of belonging sometimes to a community, you also are very aware of your own sense of privilege, which I think Ali talks about in the book, perhaps, and explores that. Why you seem to be drawn, I suppose, to the expat experience? Why do you think that is? What's so interesting about the expat life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's also an interesting observation that Ali feels more at home in Soweto than he does in Melbourne. The book is also set partly in Brunswick. And I think part of that is because it's such a welcoming community. And like I've experienced that myself. There's this word Ubuntu where you don't walk past somebody without acknowledging them and saying hello. So you walk down the street and it's just the most joyful thing. Everyone's high-fiving you and it's just like so gorgeous. And, people are so open and so welcoming. And one of the things that I love about the Sowetan people is that they speak their mind. They're very open. They tell you exactly what they're thinking. I'm a very open person to my detriment sometimes, so we're on the same wavelength. But Ali, he is aware of that sense of privilege, and there's that discrepancy between, I think, so for example, in Australia right now, we're going through an economic crisis, as is the world. And a lot of people feel that they're struggling and a lot of people are struggling. But if we look at a place like Soweto, we are so fortunate. Like even as writers, the average income of a writer is so low. But, you go to Soweto and people are maybe eating one meal a day and they're struggling to get one meal a day. In Cliptown, where I've spent the most time, there's 80% unemployment. There's no electricity unless you illegally patch into the system. There's no sewerage system. There's no school for the kids, so they have to walk, every day. So Ali, he doesn't have much money. And in fact, he's very aware, though, that he can call on his brother Griff, who is a lawyer.
Exactly.
He doesn't want to call on him. He's his younger brother. And, Griff is sort of regarded by his father as the successful one. He's got a great job and he's got this gorgeous fiance, and he seems to also be even good at, every hobby he tries. And so in comparison, Ali feels like he's a bit of a failure in his father's eyes. But, Ali has that option. Ali can, it might bruise his ego, but he can phone up, his brother and say, hey, I need some money. And Glory, who is the woman who he falls for, points out in many ways Ali's privilege. And I love Glory. She's one of my favourite characters.
She is a wonderful character. She was beautiful.
I will say that she came from this one thing that happened. So my brother and I, this one time, were invited to go to the rehearsal of the local gospel choir, which is all like kind of young, they're all sort of 18, 20, 25. And it was in the choir master's shack. So these are very small, like the whole house is smaller than, most people's dining room, for example. And so all the furniture was shoved up against the wall, like the couch was up on one side and the whole choir was jammed in there. And so we were jammed in with them. And it was the most powerful musical experience I've had in my whole life, because we're there and you just got the music coursing through your body, and it's incredible. And there was this one young girl who was so gorgeous and had such a phenomenal voice. And I just remember coming away. I didn't talk to her because we just came in for the rehearsal and we went out before they all broke up. So some of the people I knew from other, being around Cliptown, but I didn't know her and I didn't see her again. But she sparked the character of Glory, because I started thinking about, what would it be like for somebody who's got this incredible voice, but they're in a place like Cliptown? What would that actually be like? And this kind of desperation to find something better. And so she was, even though I don't know who she was and I don't know anything about her, she was the spark for that character of Glory.
Glory, I think, represents to me this novel and how it's not trying to be simplistic in its message. Obviously, apartheid has left a terrible legacy. There's hardship, poverty in Cliptown. From the outside, I think I remember Ali's parents Googling the crime stats in Soweto, so concerned that he's living there and not really comprehending the reason why. But when you dig under the surface, like you have done with your brothers, there's so many amazing moments of joy and light and art and that sense of hope, which I think is really interesting. So it's a novel that to me wasn't trying to preach a particular type of message. It was just trying to show that beautiful community. Like you said, people, when you walk down the street, would give you a high five and say hello. And unlikely, probably in Brunswick, to do that.
No, happening to be in Brunswick, that's for sure.
But you've got the passion of people who are calling out those types of hardships, but then at the same time, you've got others like the choir master in your novel who are championing those messages of hope for a better future.
Yeah, and I think the novel asks the reader to consider a series of questions, but there's no answers because it's such a complex situation there, and there are no answers. But the other thing is as well, life is complex. So at the Melbourne launch, Catherine Collette asked me, so she was interviewing me, and she asked, is there any point really, I can't remember what the exact question was, but basically, is there any point to art in a world where we just have so much going on and, all of these terrible things happening? But in the context of Shift, I think it's actually a really pertinent question, because without art, how could you survive? It's in Soweto, there is so much music and so much dance, and the arts are just even more vital and important in a place like that, because without that, there's no joy. And I don't want people to have the idea that this novel is really hard going, because there is so much joy in it.
That's right.
It is a reflection of life. And also the other thing is, sometimes I always want to talk about Soweto because I'm obsessed with it. But the thing is, the book is really about people and about relationships. And that's really what is at the heart of all of my writing, I think, is those relationships between people.
And finding that connection.
Yeah.
Even if it's in a place very different to your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Before we finish up, I want to talk about your editing experience, because I feel like you've got some great advice to give to emerging writers. You have over 2 decades experience as in-house and freelance editor. You also help out writers individually as well, preparing for submissions to publishers. What do you think? Is there anything that stands out with those manuscripts that you review that goes, oh, yes, this is going to get published? Is there anything common? Or even if not, what advice would you have to emerging writers when making their submissions?
I don't think I can ever say this is going to get published, because it is so hard to get published, and so many amazing books do not get published, and so many terrible books do get published. So just because I have a manuscript that deserves to be published on my desk, it does not mean that it will be published. And so I'm always very cautious in what I say. But there are definitely many books that deserve to be published, that is for sure. The one thing that they all have in common is a spark. It's like the X factor, and this is what any publisher is looking for. It's something that's indefinable, which is very unhelpful. But I think it comes from when the writer is writing about something that they're passionate about. So like your novel has come out of something that you were interested in about your own family, and that's driven you wanting to find more and write that book. And it's the same with me with Soweto. Like I was always fascinated with that place. And then there's so many other things in the book, like I've always loved photography and, playing on the different ways of seeing. And, the book is also about art making and, some of the things we've been talking about, self-doubt and the creative process and all of those things. So they're all things that I'm interested in exploring. And I think when you're passionate about something and you genuinely care about something, it carries with it a little spark. And that is the thing that makes a manuscript alive. So Charlotte Wood talks about writing where the heat is. I think that's such a good thing to remember, because if you write where the heat is, you'll always have that spark. And then the technical things, you can have an editor help you with those. But the spark has to be there. An editor can't insert a spark into your work. If it's not there, it's just not there.
Yes, no, great advice. And actually, I think it was an episode that on your podcast, Secret from the Green Room, that Karen Biggers did with Kate Kennedy. And Kate Kennedy said, you should dance to your desk. I love
Yeah.
that concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
That feeling of joy in your writing. And that's
Yes.
that heat, that spark, that's the reason why we want to write and explore something. Your
Absolutely.
passion for Soweto has driven this beautiful novel. So I think that's wonderful advice. And something that unless it comes from you, it's not going to come from anybody else.
That's right. And, I've seen publishers speak where they say, I didn't know that I was interested in a novel on X until it landed on my desk because it's the way that it's written. And if it comes from that, spark of fascination and passion and interest, then it will be alive on the page. And that is the crucial thing. Yeah. All the other stuff you can work with an editor to improve. I obviously also do love books that are beautifully written. And again, that is something, I mean, when you work with an editor, as you would know, they take your work to the next level. So they can't make it something it's not, but they will help you get it to the next level. And so I love it when a manuscript arrives and I can see the promise in the writing and I can see the sparks there. And, it's a good thing for people to know when they're submitting that you can tell that from reading a paragraph. I work for publishers as an editor and I also work for individual authors. And I'm very selective about the individual authors who I take on because I want to enjoy the work. And if I enjoy it, I'm also going to be able to give, really useful feedback. And I can tell immediately within that first paragraph if I want to edit a book or not. Yeah.
How do you approach the editing of your own work?
Well, everybody needs an editor, me included. I feel like I do think working as an editor, I'm thinking about structure and plot and pacing and characterization every day working on people's books. And I know that has made me a better writer. I can't quantify it. I can't, make direct links, but I know that I'm thinking about those things every day. So it has definitely, I think, made me a better writer, but I still need an editor. And in fact, I've worked with the brilliant John Clancy, who should be better known than he is because he is just an unbelievable writer. I've worked with him on both The Breaking and Shift, and he has helped me take both of those books absolutely to the next level. He's also made really hard calls. Like with Shift, and I'd forgotten this. This is how much the book has moved on. I opened up this old email from him where I was like, oh, that's right. There was this whole other character in the book who was a major character who he said, she has got to go. And I remember it was really hard at the time. I was like, oh, I know he's right, but it's just really hard to do. And I cut her out. And as soon as I cut her out, the book just took flight. So he was absolutely right. And I always know, when the editor tells you something that's right, even when it's hard, you think, oh, God damn it.
Yeah.
I knew that, but I didn't want to have to do it. And with The Breaking, the book is in 3 parts. And originally, so the whole book is set in Thailand, but originally the 3rd part, I brought the characters back to Australia. And I feel like I did that against their will. When you feel like characters actually want you to take them in a certain direction. And if you don't let them go where they want to go, the book becomes a dead thing. It doesn't work. And so that last part, it just lost pacing, it lost energy, it lost its spark. And when I gave it to John, he said, you know what? How about you try just scrapping part 3 and keeping it in Thailand? And as soon as I started writing that, it had the same energy. It just flowed in a way the original part 3 had not. And so, that's what happens when you work with a good editor. So I need a good editor just like everybody else.
Okay, so you're not superhuman woman.
No.
Okay, that's good to know.
I can pick what's wrong with other people's manuscripts immediately, but then with my own, I'm like, oh my God, how did I not see that? Like, that's the first thing I would have noticed in someone else's book. But like in my own, I don't necessarily see it. You're so deep in it.
So true. And it almost feels like, I think as you go along, do you feel like you get better at spotting when it is not following the path that it should and you are able to retract? Or do you feel like it's something that you see with hindsight?
I don't know. I feel like I'm not necessarily getting better at that. I mean, I didn't have any major wrong turns in Shift, but I wrote it quite differently to the breaking. The breaking I wrote from start to end, and the shift I wrote in different pieces. I shifted around as I was writing it. So I didn't have anything major like that with Shift, but I had different problems. I feel like every book is its own thing and you have a different set of problems with every book. And I'm sure, maybe it's Charlotte Wood, I can't remember who said this, but it's like you learn how to write that book. So you go, oh, I know how to write that book now. Doesn't mean you know how to write the next one.
Okay, well, this is really reassuring to me as I'm struggling to write book 2. So I'm just like, shouldn't I be able to do this? I've done one, but it's
No, it's different every time. And I'm writing my third novel, well, technically my fourth, if you count my novel zero, but my third novel. And it's a different structure to the other two. I mean, they both had a different structure to each other, but this is even more vastly different. And yeah, I don't know how to write that one either. I mean, I've got a complete first draft, so I feel like
good work.
I've got it. But I feel like there's a point in every book where you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know if this is going to work. Like, who knows? Constant crises of confidence.
But we're dancing to our desk, aren't we?
Yes. Oh, look, I love writing. I love writing more than I can say. It is such a joy. I know some people say it's painful to write, but it's more painful not to write. But I just love it. And maybe that's because I'm not a full-time writer. I have to write around my editing work. So I have very limited time right now because I'm in promo mode for Shift. I have no time to write, and I haven't for months. But I usually only have 2 hours, maybe twice a week or 3 times a week if I'm lucky. And so I just sit down. I'm like, bang, that's it.
Capitalize on that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great. And I've got my coffee and I'm firing and I love it. And it's just, even when I'm writing scenes that are really, there's a scene in Shift which is so emotional and I still feel emotional about it. But even writing those scenes that are so emotional, there's still this bittersweet joy in the actual writing, in the ideas and the expression and the words. I love words on a page. Yeah.
Well, I think we can all tell, Irma, you've got such an amazing experience. Now, you've given us so many top tips already, but as you know, we always finish on one. So, Irma Gold, what is your number one top tip for emerging writers?
Oh, look, it's going to be one that other people have said, but I could have picked something else, but I am going to say read. And the reason I'm going to say that is because when I was convener of editing at the University of Canberra, I remember having this conversation with the convener of the creative writing degree that I've never forgotten. And that year he had 300 students. And he said of those 300, only 20 of them were actually avid readers. And I found that so shocking as someone who has grown up just, living and breathing books and just reading constantly. I could not understand that.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? You think it's a given.
Yeah. But, when I was talking before about, the fact that I'm working on manuscripts all the time and I'm reading and I'm thinking about structure and all of those things. But when you read books, you are absorbing all of those things too. Like, you're learning without even knowing you're learning. So you're absorbing things about structure and characterization and pacing and plot and like all of those things. They're just kind of subconsciously going in. So I do think it is fundamentally the most important thing for writers to do. And I know everyone says it, but I also know that a lot of people want to be writers and they're not doing it. So that's why I'm saying it again.
Natasha Lester actually said the exact same thing. That was her top tip too. So Irma, well,
she's a good one to be in sync with. She's amazing.
That's right. So here we go. We've got Irma Gold, Natasha Lester, 2 wonderful authors telling everyone to read. And I would highly recommend everyone go read Shift.
What an amazing segue.
I'm holding it up. Even though our listeners can't see it, go and grab yourself a copy, and it's a masterclass. So read it quickly like I did and then go through and take your time. It's a beautifully crafted book. So Irma, thank you so much for joining us on the Book Deal podcast.
Thank you. It has been an absolute joy.
I've loved it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Book Deal podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the pod so you can receive updates as soon as our new eps drop. And to keep up to date with what the pod is doing, you can also find us on Instagram.